Hey, welcome everybody. We're back for another episode of Tokenomics and DAX with EOS with Luke Stokes and Justin Giudici, and yeah, really excited to kind of keep this going and have Luke back talking about EOS DAC. They're every week there's something new we can discuss. So Luke has a couple articles he kind of is wanting to go over. He just wrote an article about how you could create your own DAC. So maybe Luke, I'll let you kind of have the screen and the screen share, and Justin and I will kind of sit back and listen and maybe ask some questions at the end here. So
yeah, that sounds great. Thanks again for having me on. I was, I know you're trying to make this kind of a regular event where you want to have people coming in to talk about DAX and tokenomics and all that stuff. So very honored again that you guys want to talk about eosDAC. I think it's pretty cool. I've been pretty excited with what other people have been saying about it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here real quick. And so you're going to see a little picture-in-picture for a second. This is a post, if you guys can see that okay. This is a post I did last week. And it kind of was sparked in a little bit, in a little way based on our conversation. It was just this idea that, yeah, we've created all this value, kind of demonstrating how you can build a DAC on EOS. And that value has so far just been kind of captured up, and it's not been easy to distribute. So I started thinking, okay, what would it take to actually take all the stuff that eosDAC has done up to this point, all the smart contracts, all the front end code, all the APIs, all the scrapers and MongoDB integrations, all that kind of stuff, and just throw it out on the jungle testnet and actually build the DAC from start to finish. So I set my mind to do that. I think it was probably Wednesday night, and I worked late into the night, and then the next day, Thursday, I just worked the entire day on it. And I was taking notes, and this post is just kind of an outcome of those notes. And then after I was done with that, I said, okay, well, as you can see, I'll just scroll real quick. This post is just crazy long, right? These are all the commands you have to copy and paste, and it's walks you through the entire process, like creating all the test accounts, compiling all the contracts, configuring all the interfaces. And we can tie into some of these details if you want. But essentially, I was like, okay, that's too long. No one's going to actually read all that, right? So I was like, okay, what if I was to do a video, like walking people through this? So I turned on my camera and I started recording, and this video is the output of that. And it's an 1.5 hour long video. And that doesn't include a couple 30-minute sections for compiling EOS.io and also the CDT for compiling your EOS smart contracts. So definitely a lot of stuff here. And I kind of was like, all right, either I just wasted 2.5 days and I'm crazy, or somebody might find this useful. And so far the response has been really exciting. I mean, I just got a text message from someone I met at Crypto Mondays here in Puerto Rico last night. And he's like, hey, send me that tutorial. I want to send it to my team. So people are excited about DACs out in the community. It's not just us. It's not just a small number of people. They get that they want to start companies, but they don't want to be the dictator of those companies. They want communities. They want community owned and governance distributed and decentralized. So it's exciting to see that encouragement. And it got me to think, okay, this is probably not totally crazy. But again, just to kind of clarify this, you can literally just go in here, copy these things, paste them into a terminal, and step by step walk through this. And you can be up and running with your own version of the member client, talking to your own, contracts, and having your own, for example, this is the chain watcher. The chain watcher uses MongoDB, and it checks for actions on specific contracts that you set. And it does that so you can have the profile. So if you've been in the eosDAC member client, you'll notice that there's a way to save your own profile, and you can save, your social links, a biography about yourself, a little picture and stuff. Well, that's all done through this little watcher here. It's kind of scraping the chain, looking for this data, and and then you can create an API that's run in Node that actually looks for those actions. When it sees them, throws them into MongoDB, and then that API is available to the member client to actually set it all up so you can actually view it in the member client. And then this is right here. This whole section is all about setting up all these crazy permissions that we've talked about a number of times on the show already. And actually, it's probably worth just going ahead and pull that up real quick, just as another example. The DAC authority account is currently set to Rob, Michael, and I, but as soon as we reach that 15% voting on eosDAC, these will automatically be reset according to the top voted custodians. And all this stuff is done through the smart contracts that our team has built. And this kind of gets everything ready to go and set up for that. And I went ahead and created all these test custodians. I went ahead and, registered them as members, nominated themselves, voted for themselves, and got the whole DAC going. And you can see here, this is the end result. These permissions were automatically configured once that new period was called. And then, I went ahead just for fun to demonstrate how easy this is. I changed some CSS, changed some logo, and here's an example. This would be your own interface for your own DAC up and running, as part of the system, which is pretty cool. You could customize it however you want. You'd have your own constitution, you'd have your own logo, your own color schemes, all that stuff. And we're only going to make this easier and better. I think the kind of point of this post was for me to kind of know, okay, what have we built? How hard is it to do right now? And, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of work. So it's pretty difficult. This kind of tells me that the DAC factory that we want to build in the future, the ability to just spin up your own DAC by clicking some buttons and having the accounts created that you want, is going to be valuable. It's going to save people a lot of time as they want to spin up their own DACs. But having gone through this twice now, I went through it once to do this post. I went through it once again. So I did like the test DAC on JungleNet, and then I did the video DAC for the video. It kind of reminded me, like, this is the future today. This stuff exists right now, and anybody could use it. If you're going to do a startup this week, you could instead build a DAC. And that's just, I just proved that you could take what we've already done and do that. And that was really fulfilling for me, really exciting for me, because I've, as you guys know, I've been working with this group, and there's an amazing team that's been working with us for many, many months. And it was just kind of a way to validate a little bit about, what we've been doing and why that's so important. So anyway, that's the basics. If you guys have had a chance to check out that's just on the steemit.com/eosDAC, or again, you can hit it with SteamPeak or busy.org, or, Steemit's just a front end to the Steem blockchain. You can do it many, many different ways, eSurfer, Partico, whatever. But yeah, I would love to get your feedback on that. I'd love to get it distributed to more people so they can start playing with it and saying, okay, if I've got an afternoon or a weekend to play with this stuff, what would it be like to launch my own DAC, and what would that look like?
Wow, that's amazing. So you said it takes 2 hours at the moment, but later on it will be even quicker.
That is the hope. I mean, this process is actually like click, click, click to actually, in the future you have your DAC. But that 2 hours includes, again, like a half hour, 20, 25 minutes to compile EOS IO. It's like 30 something minutes to compile CDT. These things take some time. Thanks for the shout out, Thomas. Appreciate that. It's pretty cool. That's a good question. So he's asking, I'm wondering how Luke's eosDAC contrasts with MakerDAO. I don't personally know the governance model of MakerDAO. Maybe you guys could comment on that better.
I'm actually not too sure about their governance model either. Jun, do you know? I don't even know if they do.
Jun, I think you're muted there, buddy.
They're the ones that created the stablecoin DAI, and so they have some sort of DAO structure for it. But yeah, I'm not deeply familiar with their structure either. But I just know that they're the ones that created the stablecoin. So yeah, sorry, we should look into it a little bit. I think the other popular project we should look to as as a reference is Aragon. They're into a lot of things on the Ethereum network. So, but I haven't really. I've briefly looked at them, but it would be good to look a little deeper. So I had a question also about like what variables or parameters should people be thinking about overall when kind of before for the DAC, so custodians, like how, like just other parameters or other just ideas that in terms of designing their DAC organization that when you're actually creating it, we should kind of just keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, ultimately in the future, we want this to be completely customizable pretty easily for most people. And so I'm sharing my screen again here. Let me know if you can't see it. Okay. But there's this, config JSON file that we create as part of this process. And you can see some of the numbers that are set here. And it's probably worth just explaining this a little bit. Now, this is essentially how eosDAC is doing things, and as we're eating our own lunch, going through this process, figuring out what works and what doesn't. We'll hopefully refine this as we go, figure out, hey, that's not quite right, we'll tweak that. And our goal is to provide best practices for other DAC creation mechanisms. But of course, you don't have to use what we're doing. And so in this example, we have a lockup that you have to take some of your token and lock it up in order to be a custodian. And the thinking, or a custodian candidate. And the thinking behind that was, you want your custodians to have some skin in the game, and if they're taking a valuable token and they're basically locking it out of their access, and this lockup release time delay kind of defines how long they would have to wait to get that token back. And that includes potentially if they are a custodian and then they get voted out, or actually if they get removed, that time period starts from the moment they're no longer a custodian. So if you set that, for example, to 3 months or 6 months, if someone has some real strong skin in the game then to actually be a good actor, because they want to get that token back if you have a large lockup asset amount. But again, these are just variables that can be configured. So in this case, I'm actually not sure what we set our lockup amount to, 77. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's in minutes or seconds, but I'd have to go look into the code to figure that one out. But that's an example of type of parameters you could set. The max number of votes you can have. We went with a 5 votes per member, and we went with a total number of 12 custodians elected. The period length is 60, which is 7 days. Or actually, in this case, this might be for testnet. That might be 60 minutes. Actually, I'll have to double check that. But if you look at production, you can view all these settings are available in production, so you can see how the DAC is configured. The auth account that's going to manage all the authorizations. These are just kind of like configuration settings. This is an interesting one, the service provider. So with the eosDAC in particular, we realized that we couldn't do contractual relationships in all of these different jurisdictions very easily, because there's you've got employment insurance and withholding taxes and all these kind of things. So we recognized it made more sense based on the legal input we were getting to have a actual traditional entity. In our case, DAC is the company we're working with in Zug, Switzerland, that will set up actual employment contracts with different people. And so they're a service provider account. In my example, I left that blank, but in production, this is an actual account where funds will be transferred to the service provider, and the service provider will then be paying out the workers according to individual contractual relationships that the service provider has. What that does is protects the DAC and all the members of the DAC from joint and several liability. So they don't have all these concerns about like, okay, if one person does something bad and somebody wants to sue the DAC, they can be like, well, who's got the most money? Oh, you do? Okay, sweet. I'm going to sue you because somebody over here did something bad. These are very real concerns that we've learned as we've kind of iterated through this process. But again, it's configured so anybody can do it or not, depending on what they want to do. And then this should pay via service provider. Actually, I'm glad I'm showing this to you because that actually should be a 0 in my case, now that I've set it to 0. And this would be an example of something that could be pretty easy to update. You just reset this JSON as a multi-signature right here. You do it as a multi-signature once the DAC is launched, and then all the custodians would then vote on approving that multi-signature change. So this is, again, where the power of the distributed governance comes in, where no one person can just go and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to change that. They have to actually get an agreement. So there's some other stuff here, vote quorum percentage, the authorization thresholds. These are like between high, medium, and low, kind of how many of the 12 custodians in our case would have to agree to something in order for it to pass. So this is what we have now. These are the parameters that are there, but I'm sure there's going to be more in the future as we get a little further on. And our hope is to make it super configurable, but ultimately also super easy. So we're not going to make it like configuration overload. Once we get the DAC factory, hopefully it's going to be like, just use the basic settings, boom, 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 you got your DAC. But if you want to get really advanced, you can go in there and tweak some stuff. And of course, it's all open source, so anybody can go in and change anything, even at a lower level if they really wanted to.
Does this include the token distribution itself, or will that be part of the DAC factory software in the future?
Our hope is that it will be. We've talked about that a lot. That was definitely one of the original things as far as like, okay, you can create a token, cool. And this tutorial does walk through a tutorial for doing that. It doesn't have built in the token distribution airdrop type mechanism, but we've already done that twice as a block producer. We, as a group, eosDAC did it on Ethereum, and we also did it on EOS. So that code that we used is there open source right on our GitHub already. So I definitely imagine that'll be part of the future. There's also a possibility we might partner with other organizations like eosDAC, for example, or some other groups that will manage that as a service. And that way you could just say, I'm gonna create the token, but I'm gonna outsource that because I don't maybe have enough EOS for the RAM needed or whatever, or I want to do like a SkyGrab or Skyhook or AirGrab, all the different ways that you can distribute tokens now on EOS. But yeah, I do think that and some other things will be a major part of how this is done. But at the same time, we also recognize not everybody will want to do an airdrop. You can start a DAC with 10 people and just say, hey, everybody gets 100 tokens. And then we just start from there,
Yeah, it's really quite amazing how broadly this could be applied. Like even things like local elections or community boards and just even those simple use cases, this could apply to that to elect people in a proven fashion without any issues, But obviously it can be utilized to run entire businesses. So it's amazing.
There's a question here that says, hey, Luke, how far along are you on the UI that drives your DAC creator? What's the stack? Right now, we haven't started on the DAC factory much at all. So that's why, this tutorial was kind of my first stab at even trying to take all these individual pieces, throw them together and put them out there. As far as the stack, obviously, we're hitting node. And in this tutorial also, I didn't spin up an EOS node. We're actually hitting the Crypto Lines node that has history on it. So obviously EOS is the underlying technology. And then on top of that, you've got, in order to do the action scraper, there's a little node script for that. We have MongoDB running to store the profiles as that scrapes that off the chain. And then we also have another node script that's running that, and when I say node, I mean Node.js, that's running to create an API endpoint that the member client can look to when it hits that profile page to kind of pull up all the profiles. And as far as the member client itself, it's using Material Design and the Kazar framework. Kazar is essentially like Vue.js, organized into like a mechanism where you can easily export for mobile or desktop or browser. So that's the kind of stack at the moment.
It's great. Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. So what are you thinking in terms of Justin, Luke, or anybody out there, like in terms of maybe a small pilot project DAC? Do you guys have ideas? Like I know Justin mentioned, boards or community, boards and elections and things like that. But I mean,
even the US election.
Was it?
Even run it for the US election. Obviously, you need some sort of.
I would love to see just EOS projects take this on and be like, you know what, we've already got whatever it is, we've got a project on EOS, and it's like, well, okay, that means you have a smart contract, which you have to protect somehow in a way that the community believes you is, and then you have probably a token that you also have to protect the smart contract for that token. So how are you going to accomplish those two things confidently within your community? And to me, the only answer I've been able to come up with so far is a DAC. You have a distributed sense of governance where no one person can go and just run away with all the money. No one person can die, like we recently saw which is a terrible, terrible situation. But, we all know there's $160 million at one Canadian exchange is gone. And they have no access to the funds because they didn't distribute out the mechanisms of governance. So related to that, if you guys want, we can talk more about this for sure, or we could jump into another post that Michael Yates did that I'd love to talk about, and it relates a little bit to Thomas's question as well, as far as preventing the DAO hack on Ethereum. You guys want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And it is an important point. I mean, if you're starting a business or a company, oftentimes there's one or two people that have the key that controls everything, right? And then in EOS, like, so every DApp that you use, every application, there's risk there, and it's very concentrated risk, and the stack structure solves that problem. So just that it should be used far more often. It should be probably the first thing to think about when you're thinking about creating an application on EOS. So
there's a lot of smart people that recognize this. They're like, hey, this is totally what we need to do, even to protect ourselves. And I've mentioned before, I'm going to be working with the DAPIX and the FIO protocol. And what's really neat is when they're talking about the FIO Foundation, which is part of their roadmap, and all the tooling they're going to build to have that foundation exist and have governance. I shared this with them, of course, and they were like, man, this is awesome. This is exactly what we hope to do. And the more and more they think about using the eosDAC technology in order to manage that foundation, the more excited they're getting about it. So I'm going to go ahead and just completely related to that question, I'm going to talk about this post that Michael put together, and it relates to preventing the DAO. So the DAO, and this is just on my, I don't think he really is on Steam much, or he's not even on Twitter, but I'm going to light him up a little bit. M-I-K-E is Michael Yates on Steam. And he put this out there over the weekend, and I thought it was a fantastic post. And he kind of goes into the history of the DAO hack, what happened on the Ethereum platform, and how essentially when you create any kind of decentralized autonomous organization and you don't have an ability to modify your contracts, then you run into a really big problem. And that's exactly what happened. There was a bug, and people were able to just go in and steal all the money of the DAO. And because the code wasn't updatable, and because there was a, it just created a problem. So with EOS, it's great that we have the ability to modify these contracts, but he also mentioned we also have this half-second block time. So if there is a hack, someone could just come in and immediately steal all your funds, and a half-second later, you're like, whoa, what just happened, right? So he talks about permission systems and protocol level time delays. And these are some really powerful features that we've implemented with eosDAC. It's actually built in. I didn't go into the details there, but in the permission systems on eosDAC, when you do a transfer that's based on code, it actually has a 60-minute delay in it. And so that deferred transaction just sits there, and it has to sit at least 60 minutes before it gets the right permissions, the right weighting for it to actually initiate the transfer and succeed. So in that process, you can set up these kind of watchers that are sitting there keeping track of what's going on for that account. And these automated systems detect a delayed transaction being entered onto the blockchain. And so you can actually say, oh, whoa, that's a hack, that's a bug, the code's not meant to do that. And you can actually go in and cancel those deferred transactions before they happen. So it's a really cool example of what's possible. And so then he kind of also goes into, okay, and then even when all that fails, then you do the fallback into like insurance providers, and you can have, bonds and different things you set up. But the basic idea, and I've already seen Michael's prototype for this, he has it up and running, and he actually did it not too long ago. He actually published a private key out there. And he's like, hey, it was on the Jungle Test Network. He's like, hey, it's a private key. Somebody tried to take it. And it was fun to see people for days and days. And actually one person did succeed, which was pretty impressive. They essentially overloaded the watcher with too many things to look at once. So, and I think he had it on a 30-second delay or something like that. And they were able to like sneak in during that time. So he's already refactored the code and improved that to prevent that particular attack. But it was pretty exciting. Just like, wow, this is an actual mechanism where you can prevent crime before it happens. And that to me, I mean, I'm about creating a nonviolent future where we can have consensus that works. And I got so geeked about that. So he's working on that as another project that we're working on. Hopefully at some point in the future, it might even just be a service that we could provide. And that would enable, these DACs to have another layer of additional security where they're watching their smart contracts and they're sitting there, checking these transactions as they're going through. And it could be a whitelist or a blacklist. You can make sure that, if we don't have a contract with that EOS account via a worker proposal that's right there on chain, why are we sending them money? And you can just immediately cancel that before anybody was able to steal your funds. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah, I think that's future, like, having all these automated monitoring and protection, I guess, applications. Just great to see. So
yeah, I mean, I may have gone through that a little bit quick, so I don't know if that's all completely made sense or not. Maybe I was just thinking maybe it'd be helpful. Yeah, here, let me share one more thing real quick. I'll just share this. This is the DAC's, the DAC authority, or here it is, the DAC custodian account on Blocks. If you look at the permissions on the DAC custodian account, and this is the account that actually has most of the code for making payments and things like that, and it uses this expert permission. This is a transfer permission. Can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
And here, I can bump it up a little bit. And so basically what this says is, okay, if the custodians get together and they do a multisig, at least of the medium, that's, I forget exactly which number that is. I think that's 7 of 12 or 9 of 12. They can go ahead and do a transfer, no problem. But if the code itself, EOSIO code, wants to do a transaction on the DAC custodian account, well, it has to have this 60-minute delay, because right here, the weight on this permission is 2. And they only get 1 from the code, and they have to get 1 from the delay of 60 minutes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that's essentially under the hood how it works. So this has to be, whatever transaction is using this permission has to be, if it comes from the code, it has to be a delayed transaction. And that gives the system plenty of time to be kind of watching that and looking for it, making sure that, you know, oops, hold on here. Got to hit the right stop sharing. There it is. You get it makes sure that they, you know, you don't have your funds.
So it seems as though this time delay has like control of one key. Is that?
It's based on thresholds of the weights. So the permission, yeah, that's a way to think about it. It's almost like a key, but essentially it's just a weight. It provides a weight of 1. And so the way the EOS IO permissions are, as far as I'm learning them and understanding them, you can have a private key, can be a mechanism for specifying a weight. You can have another EOS IO account, which would be part of the multi-signature process, or you could have a time delay. So those are the 3 mechanisms, and you can have any combination of those. So you could have like a weight, you know, if you wanted to have a DAC with 1,000 people and they all had to agree, you know, you could have a whole crazy combination of stuff. Maybe there's one of those, you know, is a bunch of private keys that all have to do a multi-signature. Maybe another one is a whole bunch of EOS accounts, and, you know, so you could have like 3 different devices, a private key on each device, and then maybe, you know, another one is a time delay, and you could just design it however you want.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like that you know, because the time delay is kind of embedded in the design of kind of this multi-sig, which is great.
I have a quick question about that. So on the example you showed, there was like it needed 2 people with the DAC authority waiting. Who has that authority to provide that signing? Is that the representatives of the DAC that are elected? That's correct.
Yes, okay. Exactly. The DAC authority account, all the other accounts that make the DAC run, they all flow into the DAC authority account. And that DAC authority account, you can go look at this on blocks.io. I showed it briefly earlier, but you know, you have this high, medium, low, and 1, and those are all actual. That's where you get to actual individual accounts. And with eosDAC, right now it's just Michael, Rob, and myself. But as soon as we hit that 15%, it'll automatically switch over. And it was fun to do it myself. Like once I ran new period on my little test DAC, you know, I went over to the Jungle Blocks Block Explorer and hit refresh. And I was like, oh, it works. Look at, you know, all my little sock puppet accounts. You know, they all have their you know, their weighted DAC.
So what would have happened if the 3 of you were on a plane together and it went down? Then you'd be screwed, I guess.
You would be screwed, yes.
That's why you're
if you notice on this, if you notice on this particular account, the owner account has a weight of 1, and it has there's a private key still sitting there, and we did that on purpose because if you know, basically it's a baby. The DAC is this brand new baby, and we're going to bring it to the world, and we're not going to be like, all right, baby, go ride the New York subway. Yeah, you know, like we're gonna like let it grow up a little bit. So our plan is, you know, once the DAC launches and we watch it for, you know, a couple months or something like that, and that private key is still controlled by Michael, Rob, and I on a Keybase account. I think there are backups as well stored elsewhere. But ultimately, yeah, those are the kind of things that get into much larger discussion about backup strategy and how you can, you know, Glacier and all these different ways for protecting your private keys.
So when you guys reach the 15% and you have all these people elected, are you going to change it from 2 to more users need to?
It automatically does it. Yep. The code actually, that's what that small, medium, high, like all that figures out. As far as that one particular example I gave you, that'll stay 2 because it's EOS IO code and a 16.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know, but it said DAC authority at MED, which is medium. And so when I look in here, well, this just says 2, of course, but if you were to look on the actual, like after it launches, each high, medium, and low has a different threshold weight, just like you're saying.
Yeah. It's great that you brought this up because a lot of people kind of take a stab at EOS IO that, you know, it's not completely immutable. But this actually shows that you can change the mutability depending on what you need. What I haven't worked out is how do we make something completely immutable? Is it just spreading the multi-sig?
Yeah, no, it's not that hard at all, actually. No, we've actually done that. So one of our contracts in the system is a escrow account. So when you're sitting there and you're a worker and you come to the DAC and say, hey, I'm going to do this work and get paid this amount of money, and the DAC's like, cool, no problem. And then they agree to that, and here's the arbitrator who's going to validate my work. And then, you know, a couple months down the road or whatever, you get your work done, you submit it, and there's a whole new DAC custodian board, and they're like, we don't like this guy, we don't like this work. Nah, we're not going to pay you. It's like, wait, what? You pay me. And that creates an opportunity to sue the DAC, right? These are the liability things we're trying to avoid. And this is the problems we have with traditional systems. They don't have programmatic ways to deal with this. So they have to go to the courts, and they have to go to the government, and they have to go with people with guns and say, work it all out, right? In this case, the arbitrator could be like, hey, I put my reputation on the line. I vowed it. This guy did the work. This girl did the work. It's done. Let's pay him. So that money, right as the worker proposal got accepted, that money gets moved over to this kind of escrow account. And that escrow account has nulled out keys. So the key is literally set to null. No one can modify the contract. The contract is set in stone. And that in that contract, it actually kind of does its own multisig via the code. So it actually stores in the tables, in EOS.io, in the RAM tables, it's like, oh, it's this person, and this person. I need a 203. And that will include the custodian, active, the DAC authority account, the whatever arbitrator was specified, and the actual worker. So it's two of those people have to agree in order to get paid. So if there's no conflict, that obviously the custodians and the worker agree, and boom, they get paid. And so then the next obvious question is, well, what do you do, when that contract breaks, right? Well, it's a limited amount of funds, thankfully, because it's just active worker proposals that are about to be paid. And then two, you just update your config and create a new account. Basically, you create a different EOS account with the improved code, and then you kind of like redeploy that config JSON I was showing you about, and it specifies that new escrow account.
Excellent. So that's an inbuilt feature into EOS.io. You just set it to null.
You can null your keys out right now if you want and never get access to your funds or your contract again.
Awesome. So can you explain what actually is making your key null? What does that actually mean?
I mean, I actually haven't done it myself, but null is like a concept in programming. It's basically the absence of anything. And so you go in and you actually set the key to the absence of anything. So every single time it tries to validate a signature of anyone trying to do anything with that account, it's going to fail every time. So that's essentially the code is now immutable. The only way it would not be is if, and this I think gets back to a little bit about people's concerns about EOS.io, is that if the block producers, all got together and agreed to modify an account. And this is why all the ECAF drama and all that was a problem, because people were a little concerned about that. They're like, hey, blockchains aren't supposed to let you do that. But in reality, and I noticed Thomas was on here earlier, he'd probably talk to this also, every blockchain has governance, whether it's the developers who are submitting code changes, whether it's the mining pools or the miners, whether it's the users doing initiating a user-initiated hard fork or soft fork. There's governance in all models, and that creates changes. So Ethereum today is not the same Ethereum as Ethereum Classic. I mean, they made a change, but they kept it with the name Ethereum. Bitcoin today is not the same Bitcoin, but it's still called Bitcoin. So all these things change over time. It's just a matter of kind of thinking through, okay, do we want that change transparent? Do we want to have a mechanism for it? Or do we want to have it kind of like unknown? And this is why I like DeepAuth so much. It's all transparent.
Definitely.
That's awesome. Yeah, just real quick before I forget, is there any, this is a little bit of a side thing, but, key recovery, have you guys, is there any interesting things on the key recovery side of, I know this.
It's funny. I was actually kind of thinking about this. It was kind of in my head the whole weekend about, again, that account where someone passed away and they lost access to their account. And I was thinking about, there are a number of different ways this can be done related to writing some code that, has access to the system to say, hey, under these circumstances, just go ahead and reset the permissions to something else, and that's essentially what our DAC custodian account does. Once new period runs, it just resets all the permissions to whoever the top 12 voted are. So I was kind of thinking through this, and it was kind of this pet project idea I had, and I didn't get to design it out fully, but I was like, what if I deployed a contract where you could just go in there and say, here's my 5 trusted people. I know them, they're cool, they're solid. And then that contract wanted me to ping it every 6 months. And all I had to do was just sign a message saying, yep, still alive, I'm all good. And then if it doesn't hear from me, then it goes into my account because it has permissions. And this could be one of those immutable contracts that no one can tweak with. And it could go in and actually reset my permissions to be a 3 of 5 on my 5 trusted people. And now they could then work with my wife or my, go into my will and look at, who are my next of kin or whatever, and make sure that those funds, those would be kind of my my financial custodians that I trust, kind of a deal. So I think it's a fairly simple contract that anybody could deploy right now to do account recovery. That's essentially what Steam does. You know, you set a single account recovery person you trust, and then built into the blockchain, there's a mechanism to kind of challenge account ownership, and you could say, hey, look, I just got my account stolen from me. You know, and that person would say, yeah, legit, I know the guy, he did get his account stolen, and they can reset the permissions, reset the private keys. So yeah, the ping of death, nice. And it's, you know, it's one way that, you know, there's a lot of different mechanisms, and I've been thinking about it a lot because I think it's going to become more and more of an important issue as people start putting more and more value into blockchains, and they don't want to necessarily go back to the old model of custodians and third-party counter risk. So we have to build systems where you take your trusted people that you know, and maybe even, as I was thinking about this, you could even have a system as part of that contract that pings the people you've set on the contract. And if they don't respond, they get removed. So let's say like they're not into crypto anymore and they've stopped using EOS. Well, now it's like, I don't want my whole contract to be locked up because too many people dropped off the multi-sig permission, right? So there'd have to be a mechanism where you could kind of keep that active as well.
Yeah.
Who's watching the watchers kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's going to be incredibly important. And as companies are, you know, maybe, you know, start creating accounts for, let's say, people and don't want to handle people's keys, you know, somehow at least being maybe one recovery partner, maybe have another third party be a recovery partner, maybe a friend or some combination, some multi-sig. I think that's really the future. I think, especially when, it's just so many occurrences of people losing keys, and that's, in terms of usability, that's probably the biggest a challenge for new people. So so that's awesome. Yeah, it seems like there's a solution out there that you are.
Yeah, I think it would be a pretty straightforward contract. I mean, it's, again, similar pieces to what we're already doing within eosDAC. So it's something, if I get the time, I'll probably think about deploying it somewhere so people can play with it and use it. Makes sense. I mean, I'm not a C++ programmer, so but I plan to. I plan to dive into this stuff a little bit more because it's too dang fun. There's too much cool stuff going on.
Yeah, and we're relying on people like you, Luke. I don't know, Justin. I played around with,
and I'm relying on like Dallas and Michael Yates and Pieces and Bits. I mean, all these amazing guys with the EOSDAC team, doing great design. I mean, all of these guys. You know, it's great. It's really cool to see people working together.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Perry has another question. Sorry, I got something in my throat.
All right, it says having on-chain is definitely the long-term answer, but the Dashlane secure note sharing feature is something people can use today. How to share your saved items. I'm not familiar with Dashlane. That looks interesting.
I assume it's a centralized platform. I think it's much like LastPass or OnePass or whatever the other one's called. I guess the one problem with that is that it is centralized in, where the data is held. Hopefully something like PrivEOS combined with EOS IO chains will allow us to do this on the blockchain. I think that would be amazing.
So you just reminded me of another piece of that thing I was thinking about this weekend. So I mentioned, like, I'm working with FIO protocol, and the way it kind of does mappings between your FIO address and your blockchain address. That's encrypted data that they store in a blockchain in a way that you can access it. And of course, we all know if you put encrypted data on a blockchain, there's some concern if the encryption mechanisms, become easier to crack later in the future. So I was thinking about a system where it could automatically potentially re-encrypt the data, decrypt it and re-encrypt it regularly with new passwords and potentially different algorithms. So you could have the algorithm cycling to the most advanced algorithm that's the latest, and that would give you some sense of security that the data itself would be okay. The challenge is that transaction that put that original version of the data there, obviously could, be exposed. So you wouldn't want to put super private data on there. So the way I was thinking about it is you'd put like someone's name, email address, and phone number along with the key that they're supposed to use to access your account. And the important piece would be, so let's say I've got like, I'll say, let's say it's all of us, right? So the three of us do this, and we put, we have all of our information. It's in a block, it's encrypted, and it's there. So then some event happens, and it's like, oh man, sorry, June is gone. So Justin and Luke, we got to get together and help, recover June's Jun's funds for his
thanks a lot.
you know, and we would go in there and we would actually use our key, because that message would be multi-sig encrypted with our public keys, or our private keys, public keys. We'd use our private key, decrypt it, and then we would get access to you know, maybe pieces of that password or wherever we need to access it. And the trick I was thinking about would be, if you have this regular re-encryption process, maybe every month, you would also change the password, so that every month the secret that you'd want to be protecting would only be valid for that 1 month. It's almost like using one-time pads in encryption. You know, you do a one-time password. It's like if you send the second message, it has no relationship to the previous one. So the idea being that if you were to re-encrypt the next month, you would have already changed the password. So even if they got the private key to what it was last month, it doesn't help them today, because it's a new password now for that account. So this idea is you could build these systems that would be automatically updating your passwords and would still store encrypted data on the blockchain and contact information for people who need to access it, but done in such a way that it's updating all the time. So anyway, that was just my idea over the weekend. I haven't designed it or anything like that. If somebody runs with this and makes a great business, be sure to let me know about it.
I wonder if, like, I like your idea of using time delays, and say if, you know, someone passes away, I like the idea of having multiple people being involved in a multi-sig to get access, but then adding in a time delay in case, you know, those people are just trying to take over someone's account and they're actually alive.
Yeah.
So
you can totally have like a couple of days or something, and that way the other members of the family could be like, "Who are these jokers? You know, this isn't what was in the will." You know,
exactly.
Totally. That'd be cool. Well, guys, I'm going to have to get going here pretty soon. This has been a fun conversation, though. Thank you so much for just letting me talk about what we're doing. I always appreciate the opportunity to clarify, because it's complicated stuff, and I realize unless we are telling people about it, you know, people aren't going to realize what it is we're up to.
Yeah, no, it's exciting stuff going on. You're ready for people to use. So that's great. You know, and it'll probably get a little easier over time, but it seems, you know, using your instructions, you know, they'll get it done. And I think it's
at least possible. I wouldn't say easy, but it's at least possible.
Yeah. All right. No, I'm excited. Yeah, I'm planning everything I'm doing. I'm planning to use, you know, your you know, eosDAC tech, and so I'm excited about it for sure. And I'm sure I think a lot of people out there as well are gonna just start, you know, having this as the first choice of you know, organizational structure. So
I hope it helps a lot of people.
Just one final question. Do you guys have any plans to kind of monetize these sorts of services? Because it's just so awesome what you're providing. Like, could you add in a consultancy service or something? I guess.
Yeah. I think for sure that's the ultimate future. I mean, can you imagine a world where like every new startup wants to be a DAC, right? Well, shoot, I mean, anybody involved with eosDAC at all is going to immediately be an expert in that whole ecosystem, being like, oh my gosh, you know, we need to get people to help us consult. So I've certainly thought about that quite a bit. Definitely these different services, like the one that Michael's working on, where you could actually protect accounts, you know, via that watcher system. I think that would definitely be a value add. And so we've talked about, you know, obviously we want to, back to kind of the tokenomics, the other half of this meetup, is like, how can we improve tokenomics of eosDAC and make, you know, really enable the token holders to participate in that value that we're all together creating and being kind of, you know, participants in. So yeah, I could imagine we could have services where you'd kind of either stake eosDAC or pay for them with eosDAC in order to get the benefits of this. But it's an interesting thing, because we also really strongly believe in open source technology. And I have friends of mine that have started their own companies that have done well because they just gave everything away for free. And then it was such good code that so many people got excited to use that it got to the point where it's like, well, you're clearly the experts. How can we hire you to run this? You know, so I would love to see the example of like a reverse worker proposal where people come to the DAC and say, hey, here's what we want done. We're willing to buy up, you know, this many tokens, or more valuable, more importantly to what we want to do, we're going to do a DAC and we're going to airdrop on everybody in the eosDAC community. So if you own EOSDAC tokens and you voted and you participated, you're a member, you're going to get part of this airdrop. And actually, oh, that reminds me, I'm so glad you just reminded me. We have an airdrop coming. Very excited. eosDAC has announced it, and this has just been put in our Discord announcements today. eosDAC is going to be doing an airdrop. I think it's on February. Man, I should get this date right. Let me check real quick on GitHub. There was a comment about it just recently. essentially coming up very soon, they are going to be doing an airdrop. Here we go. I'm going to grab the date right here. It is February 11th, 2019 at 1300 UTC. If you have voted for custodian candidates on eosDAC, then you will be a participant in the eosDAC airdrop. So they are dropping, it doesn't say here how many tokens it is. On the announcement it does. They're dropping to those people. And so that is one of the models that we have thought through that we hope will become a kind of standard practice. When someone uses the eosDAC technology and they're going to airdrop a bunch of new tokens or do an ICO or anything like that, that they will consider us part of their founders, and they will hold back some tokens for the members who made all of this possible. And then that way it just kind of becomes this value creation cycle where everyone who's involved in eosDAC continues to onboard more DACs because they recognize, oh, wow, then we all get more tokens as people are providing new ecosystems and economic
That totally
systems.
makes sense. And as they bring more value to your token holders, then that actually means you can do more work and improve the system that eosDAC is actually making use of. So that's really beautiful. It's good.
And what's beautiful about that is, like, we didn't ask them to do that.
Yeah.
That to me is the most exciting thing about that entire process. Is they approached us and said, hey, you guys are so awesome, such an inspiration to what we're doing. We want to reward you. And I was just like, sweet, that's the model we're looking for. So again, thank you guys for letting us come on the show, because like sharing that kind of information gives other people thinking, oh, wow, yeah, I want to do that too. Yeah, let me make sure I hold back some tokens for that airdrop to that community because they've been so valuable to us. That'd be great.
Yeah, especially like an active community, because as you release a new app, you want to get active users on board, and by encouraging the ones that are voting and participating, that encourages more participation on your own app. You're getting those people who are participants, That's perfect. Cool.
That's a cool cycle. All right, guys, I got to get going. My wife just dropped off some dinner here, so I'm going to get eating.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Luke.
Coming up as well. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. Take care, all guys.
See you next time. So we can wrap up pretty soon. Justin, any final words or comments or thoughts?
Oh no, I want to get my hands into this software now and set one up for my team. I think it would be cool to just play around with it. There's just so many ideas that I think I could kind of extrapolate from just playing around with it. I think it's just got unlimited possibilities for implementing.
Yeah.
What are some of the cool things you want to use a DAC for?
Yeah, just all the like he mentioned, just any of the startups that I'm gonna start with, and so there's so that's what I'm thinking. Like any company, that so Big Cash is the one project. It's kind of a financial app that I've been working on for a while. That's kind of on standby, but and I have a corporation for a Delaware C Corp, right? And it's not doing much. I'm not doing much with it at this point, and just trying to kind of. But now I'm thinking, okay, let's shift over to a pure DAC model. Maybe keep the corporation alive to interact with the DAC and have that service provider model at least in the beginning, but ultimately just go pure DAC after that. But it's set up so that you can have this real world entity and a DAC to bridge the real world and the virtual world, and then. But I think over time that part might not be even necessary. So, but it's okay to start with it. I don't think that there's a problem with that. So anyway, so at least that project I'm gonna be looking at that DAC technology for. So yeah, it'd be great. So
definitely, I think any app that is coming out on all the EOS IO chains at the moment, there's probably in many cases a lot of security flaws, or not security, in that you could have that same problem that we saw with that New Zealand exchange, where the founder dies and then no one can get access to funds. Like that must be a problem on like a good proportion of decentralized app projects at the moment, where if they implement a solution like this, they will have those checks and balances there. So if something happens to the main smart contract developer, then other people can take over that contract. It's just a simple way to utilize other people's open source software. It's checked and been tested to a great extent within the EOS DAC team. It makes sense to kind of not reinvent the wheel and utilize some of their code and some of their features. A lot of the alerts and that sort of thing, I don't know if they're open source, but the implementation of those. But I think there's a lot to learn from projects like this, and it's fantastic that they're completely open source.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just back to your kind of the first part of your kind of message about the continuity plan. You have a continuity plan built in with a DAC that you wouldn't have normally, where you just really have a lot of one person in the company, or two people maybe at most, have control of all the keys in the entire company or organization. And yeah, that's really very, very risky. So I mean, some people I'm sure use multisigs, but the DAC, it's kind of built in, so you have you won't have those problems that that you mentioned.
Probably not a problem now, but in the future, like as token prices go up and BPs start earning more money, like you could have a situation where someone kidnaps the main founder of the block producer and tries to steal kind of money from that organization. If you have some sort of time delay and an ability for other people to react and pause or stop a transaction to see what's happening and check in with that founder, like there's all sorts of systems like that could be quite helpful going forward.
Yeah, it's all about usability too, and just and security, because in the end you could be as secure as possible, but if you lose your keys or something happens, that's it. So you're never comfortable, I think, if you're paranoid about how you're storing your keys. So if you have systems where there is this kind of recovery system, or that's going to make the security and usability that much more powerful. So so that's exciting. So I think that's pretty much we'll keep doing this every week. Really appreciate you, Justin, coming in. I don't know if anybody has any other questions, but we'll keep this going. I think maybe maybe we can launch a DAC live on the next webcast or something. I don't know. Maybe a small one just for fun. Like I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there. So let's do it. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, maybe for EOS Ignite, we gotta figure out how to create something. Yeah, live airdrop for current viewers. Yeah, definitely. I think that'll be great. So all right, sounds good, guys. If there's no questions, we'll see you back next week, and I think continue the DAC conversation. We'll throw in tokenomics as well if there's something interesting that comes up on that side as well. But it seems as though DAX is the topic of the moment. So, but anyways, really appreciate it, guys. Justin.
Cheers, Jun. Thanks as always.
As always, and see you guys next time. Have a happy Lunar New Year. Take care.
Catch you guys.